Hi! As I was getting ready to do my homework this week for Danny's class, I found something. I thought of something that I had in a folder somewhere. I'm going to share it with you in just a little bit, but I also want to tell you that I'm pretty excited about this week's homework because as a former photographer, I always look at light and shadow and shading and how things are lit, and I feel like it really helps me when I draw that I see those things sort of naturally because I was trained to do so. So I'm really excited to do my homework. Also, I found this, or I didn't really find it. My dad gave it to me a couple of years ago because he found it somewhere in a folder. This is a drawing that I made when I was 12 years old. And it was an assignment for school, and I remember that classmates were complaining about it because it was so much work, all the hatching, and you had to do it with dip pen and everything. And I was just so happy to do this assignment. You can see I really enjoyed it, and that I was really pushing the boundaries and finding out that the whites, if you keep the whites clean, they become like light, and the darker you do your hatching, the darker shades you get. So I really enjoyed it, and I have no idea how I came up with this scene. I really like it, a kitchen scene, but I wonder if it was in the back of my head when I did this drawing in this book. About 25 years later, another kitchen scene, also hatched. And this was actually done with just a simple ballpoint pen. And I really like the hatching with that because you can also use very thin grayish strokes. So you can also push the boundaries of your tools as well. Okay, so that was my trip down memory lane that just popped up in my mind when I was getting ready for my homework. And now I really want to draw, so let's get to work. Here's the little still life I put right in front of me, my teapot and a mug. This is a combination of items that I've drawn before for another study hall video, but that was all about continual lines and watercolors. Now we're focusing on the shadows, so I pointed a lamp on it as a nice spotlight for sharp shadows. First, I'm going to not even look at the outlines or shapes of the subjects. Instead, I will draw the shadows only. When you look at the shadows as shapes, and when you draw those shapes, at first you're like, wait, this looks really weird. But the further you get into the drawing, the better you see the effect of it. The eyes of the viewer will actually see the shape that you haven't drawn at all. By just drawing simple blocks of shadow, you are creating shapes and even depth. It's pretty neat, isn't it? Now for the hatching part of the homework. Following Danny's lead, I will draw the outlines first, drawing the print on the mug as well. To make sure I get the overlapping shapes right as well as the proportions, I keep an eye on the negative shapes. Now I'll switch my mind towards focusing on the shadows again. Like I did with the marker earlier, I'm going to fill in those shaded areas using hatching lines. Now I am also taking note of the different gradations in darks. So in the areas that have the darkest shadows, I will hatch and crosshatch, and maybe even hatch 1 or 2 more layers, retracting my lines a bit with each layer for a smooth transition from lighter to darker shades. If you keep looking at your subject, you'll keep noticing more subtle tones and gradations, so you may want to come back at some areas to add a bit more dark. I make sure to keep highlights that I see absolutely white on my paper. Now let's not forget those drop shadows. I'll fill those in with single hatching lines. I could make them darker, but I don't want to muddy up the drawing. This is sufficient to indicate the drop shadows. I like what I see here, so I'll call it done.